He disappeared for several years, and everyone assumed he had lost. He returned quietly, limping, carrying someone else's scars and hollow eyes. But behind that silence, a storm was waiting. Those who betrayed him had built new lives, unaware that every smile was recorded, every word preserved, and every step was leading them to a point of no return. He didn't come back for answers. He came for the ending, and no one is ready for how it will unfold. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. Brandon Hartley had a reputation that preceded him, forged in one of the roughest parts of Chicago. From an early age, he was known for a temper that could ignite in seconds and a will that wouldn't bend under pressure. Even before he ever stepped into combat boots, he was already feared and respected on the streets. His defiance became legend among classmates, while teachers deemed him unmanageable. His father, Benjamin, a decorated Korean War Marine, often questioned whether Brandon would end up behind bars before he found his footing in life. Against the odds, Brandon made a sharp turn when he hit 18. He joined the Marine Corps Reserve, channeling his inner fire into something structured, something purposeful. The discipline gave him control. For once, his rage became an instrument rather than a liability. Around that same time, Sabrina entered his life. They'd first crossed paths in high school, and his parents took an instant liking to her. She was sharp, determined, and already on a career trajectory, clearly set on becoming a paralegal. Sabrina exuded confidence and ambition, routinely topping academic charts. 3 years out of school, they exchanged vows. As Sabrina climbed toward her career goals, Brandon picked up additional hours at a local auto shop to help keep their life afloat. Between her rising legal income and his military and garage paychecks, they carved out a modest living. But beneath the surface, tension brewed. Sabrina never let go of the idea that Brandon should aim higher than weekend drills and engine repairs. At work, she boasted about her marriage to a Marine with potential, someone she believed would elevate them into a better class of life. Her comments about real men cut deep, gnawing at Brandon's self-worth. Whenever he confronted her, she'd pivot, her anger dissolving into seductive charm, pulling him back in like a tide he couldn't resist. It all unraveled in March of 1967, when Brandon volunteered for deployment to Vietnam. His father nodded with pride. Sabrina, on the other hand, erupted. That evening, her fury boiled over. "You're seriously leaving me stuck in this dump while you run off to play war hero?" she snapped, venom in every word. "What if you die over there, or worse, what then?" They stood toe-to-toe in the small, worn-down living room. Brandon sat on their sagging couch, arms folded across his now chiseled chest. Years of training had reshaped him, but in that moment, Sabrina towered. "I made a commitment," he said firmly, voice low. "To the core. I won't break it." "To who, Brandon? To some fantasy of your father's? To your own damn pride?" "You've never once thought about me in all this," she lashed out. "Do whatever you want. Get yourself killed. But don't expect me to put my life on hold while you chase glory." His shoulders stiffened. "Sabrina, I've never betrayed you. I work myself to the bone at that garage, keeping this roof over our heads. Don't tell me I don't care." She moved closer, her gaze ice cold. "Oh, really?" she spat. "Then explain why we're still stuck in this dead-end life? We scraped together enough for a down payment, and that's it. You think your military checks and greasy mechanic hands are building a future? I'm the one pulling us forward, me, with my job, my ambition." Brandon clenched his jaw. "So this is about money now?" he muttered. She laughed, sharp and bitter. "It's about progress, Brandon. I won't waste my years tied to a man content with mediocrity." He told her then, his voice steady, the exact date he'd ship out. She cried that night, but by morning her grief had calcified into steel. As he zipped up his duffel, she didn't wish him well. Instead, she sneered, "Don't you dare come back in a wheelchair. I'm not spending my life nursing a cripple." His hands balled into fists. "Jesus, Sabrina, you could try having a heart." She shot back with scorn. "You dare preach to me about heart, while you run off to a war half the country hates? Don't be shocked if I move on while you're out there playing martyr." Anger swelled inside him, but he held it in. Their farewell was far from tender. That last night, she reached for him. "This is mine," she growled, gripping him possessively. "Don't let some Vietnamese whore near it." "No one but you," he replied, though his tone was weighted with bitterness. What followed didn't feel like love. It felt like a final battle. Before departing, Brandon updated his will. He wasn't sure he could trust Sabrina with everything, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her with nothing. He arranged for part of his pay to go toward the house and bills, one less thing for her to resent. Then he shipped out, his chest freshly inked with the words, "Death before dishonor." Nothing could have braced him for what awaited. Vietnam was a nightmare wrapped in heat, insects, and the stench of smoke and death. As both a mechanic and a fire team leader, Brandon endured trials that hardened him further. Initially dismissed by career Marines as just another weekend warrior, he clawed his way to their respect through tenacity and grit. In combat, his jaw locked tight, animal-like, earning him the nickname Pit Bull. Others drowned their pain in women or whiskey, but Brandon stayed faithful, even as Sabrina's cruel words haunted him like a ghost. They all gave him grief, but none more than Harker. With a loud chuckle, he tossed out, "Bet there's some guy keeping your side of the bed warm back home." The jab dug in deep, a shard he couldn't shake. Brandon never missed a letter to Sabrina, sending them off like clockwork. But her responses slowed, from bi-weekly to barely once every month and a half. Even his parents, who weren't exactly wordy, managed to write more often than she did. Then came the pictures. Sabrina on a beach, smiling in a tight swimsuit. All Brandon could think about was, who took the shot? That unease festered in him, spreading like corrosion. Christmas passed without a single word from Sabrina, just a brief card from his mom and dad. He shoved the ache into a box inside his chest. There was no time for heartbreak in a war zone. Keep your head straight or die, simple as that. Then came January of '68, just beyond the outskirts of Da Nang. There'd been murmurs about a possible offensive during Tet, the Vietnamese New Year. The whispers proved true. The Viet Cong came in waves. Mortars shattered the silence, gunfire lit up the night, and soldiers dropped like pins. Brandon's unit was caught, no room to move. Harker and 3 others were gunned down before anyone could react. Brandon screamed and opened fire, pouring every ounce of fury into his weapon. A round tore through his thigh. Another nicked across his face, opening a deep gash. Shrapnel nearly ripped his ear from his head. Still, he didn't fall. He barked commands, rallying the few men left, forcing them to hold out until air support came. When the medevac finally arrived, Brandon was fading fast, soaked in his own blood. As they hoisted him into the chopper, his gaze caught the lifeless forms of his brothers-in-arms strewn across the ground. That sight burned into his soul as the bird climbed. A part of him wondered if it would have been better to stay behind and end it there. He regained consciousness in a San Francisco military hospital. The surgeons had saved his leg, though it was a wreck. His ear was a torn stub under heavy bandages. His face required rows of stitches. The doctors said he was past the danger zone, but months of rehab waited ahead. It wasn't long before his parents arrived, tears streaming. But Sabrina didn't come, not even a phone call. His dad, Benjamin, tried to lighten the mood. "Didn't I teach you how to duck?" he joked, though his smile faltered. Brandon managed a tired grin. "Must have skipped that drill." His mom reached for his arm, gently stroking it. "We're so proud of you, baby. It breaks our hearts that you're hurt, but we're just so thankful you made it back." Still, Brandon kept glancing at the doorway, convinced she'd walk in at any moment. But the door never opened for her. "Where's Sabrina?" he finally asked, voice sharper than he intended. His parents shared a strained look. Benjamin sighed heavily. "Son, we don't really know. She's still in town, but she's not picking up the phone. Last time we saw her was a couple months back. She was kissing some guy goodbye. Corvette driver." Brandon's stomach dropped. "Blue Corvette?" Benjamin nodded slowly. "Yeah, young guy from her office, I think. Caught her at the door in a bathrobe. She waved, didn't say much. I've been checking the house. It's a mess." Bills left unpaid, spoiled food filling the fridge, mold creeping across the walls. The place looked deserted. Anger swelled beneath Brandon's bandages. His mother tried to calm him. "You need your energy to recover," she whispered. But Benjamin wasn't finished. "There's more. She's been pulling cash from your accounts. I've covered some bills to keep the lights on. I'm sorry, son." Brandon shut his eyes tight. The rage boiled just under his skin. Harker's words echoed in his mind. "Jody's probably in your bed right now." Back then, it had been a joke. Now, it wasn't. He felt himself slipping into a free-fall. He called a Navy legal officer the same day. The paperwork was drawn up immediately, granting his parents full power of attorney. They froze the accounts, cut Sabrina off, and did what they could to save what remained. Benjamin offered to hire a private investigator, George Williams, an ex-detective. Brandon didn't even blink. "Hire him. I want every detail." The whole damn truth. The next day, Benjamin returned with grim news. It was worse than Brandon had feared. Sabrina had emptied his savings. She'd moved in with the Corvette guy. Brandon's jaw clenched. "That clown," he muttered. "Yeah, that's the one," Benjamin said. "She's living with him now. The house is trashed. The bed's, well, let's just say it's been used. A lot." Brandon's voice dropped to a growl. "Burn it. Burn the whole bed. The sheets, the pillows, everything. I don't want a single piece of her left." His mother tried to console him. "We'll put things back together, sweetheart." But all he could feel was fire in his chest. The only thing holding his mind together were the memories of the men who hadn't made it. They haunted his sleep. Harker's eyes, lifeless, staring up from blood-soaked dirt. The faces of the dead visited him nightly, offering no peace. 2 weeks blurred by. The hospital awarded him the Purple Heart. A Marine officer submitted his name for a Silver Star. None of it mattered. There was no honor left to feel. No sense of victory, just betrayal, and grief, and a sleep full of ghosts. Brandon had been formally released from the hospital, though the physicians warned that a full recovery, one where he could walk without strain, might still be a year away. They handed him a cane with practiced sympathy and sent him off, offering smiles that didn't quite mask their pity. At a small ceremony, Lieutenant Colonel Arvin Johnson pinned the Silver Star to his uniform and praised his unwavering bravery. His parents wept with pride, their faces lit with admiration. Brandon felt empty inside. He was returning to a life that had crumbled. At the airport, protesters hurled insults his way, but his parents kept their heads high, refusing to acknowledge them. When they reached home, Brandon hobbled into what had once been a place filled with promise, now reeking of abandonment and despair. The house he had imagined sharing with Sabrina had become a relic of shattered dreams. His mother had tried to clean up, but the damage went too deep. Trash spilled from bins, the sink was piled with filthy dishes, and the air was thick with the clashing stench of faded perfume and decay. Sabrina had stripped the place nearly bare, taking most of her belongings and leaving behind only a few tattered dresses and the echo of a future that never happened. On the table sat their wedding album, pages ripped out in a fury. In the bathroom, trash lay both wedding rings. Rage burned his vision. He wanted to destroy something, anything. But instead, he inhaled sharply and stood frozen. Then his eyes caught the glint of his Bowie knife, still tucked in its sheath, the words "March or Die" etched into the leather. It had remained untouched in his duffel since Vietnam, as if waiting for this moment. That night, unable to sleep in the defiled bedroom, he dragged the fouled mattress out and crashed in the guest room. By morning, resolve hardened in his chest, he picked up the phone. He called George, his father's longtime friend, and Mike McGregor, a veteran attorney. The time for patience was over. Action was due. When they arrived, Brandon was limping back and forth across the living room, gripping his cane so tightly his knuckles were bloodless. George placed a reel-to-reel recorder on the table. "I've been following Sabrina and that bastard Ethan Sloan for weeks," George said. "You need to hear this." The tape hissed as it came to life, the background noise of a bustling restaurant underscoring the conversation. "So, Sabrina," Ethan said with smug confidence, "have you given my proposal any real thought?" "I'm not sure I can do that to Brandon," she replied, voice quivering. "Yes, I cheated, and I'm pregnant. But expecting him to raise another man's baby while I keep seeing you? That feels cruel." "Don't be naive," Ethan sneered. "He worships you. We dangle the threat of divorce, hit him with alimony and child support. He's a grunt. It'll be a walk in the park." "And if he refuses?" Sabrina asked, voice dropping low. "Houses go up in flames," Ethan answered, tone disturbingly casual. "Brakes can fail. Muggings happen. You'd really hurt him?" she whispered, clearly rattled. "Keep your voice down," he hissed back. "Only if he forces our hand. He was a fool to go off to war. Now he's broke. His accounts are empty. He needs you more than ever." Sabrina exhaled slowly. "Maybe you're right. He never had much. I want someone who can give me more." Brandon stood trembling as the audio cut out. McGregor leaned back in his chair, jaw set. "That's enough to bring serious charges. Conspiracy, possible attempted murder, financial fraud. It's a strong case." Brandon's eyes were dark, his tone low and controlled. "She wants me to play dad to his kid while they use my home like it's theirs?" George wound the tape back and played another part. "What kind of man leaves his wife for a war?" Ethan laughed, cruel and loud. Sabrina followed with a scornful chuckle. "An idiot. If he'd stayed," she said bitterly, "maybe I wouldn't have cheated. But this is more thrilling. Brandon's stuck in the past, broke and boring. You've got ambition." "Exactly," Ethan said. "And if he becomes a problem," he added coldly, "we'll remove him. My law firm's behind me. And with your legal smarts, babe, we'll handle any consequences." George slammed the stop button, his jaw clenched. "They think they're bulletproof," he growled. Brandon's face twitched with fury. "Mike," he said through gritted teeth, "I want the house. I want every legal move we can make. She's getting nothing." Mike gave a single nod. "Already ahead of you. Divorce is in progress. We're filing civil action against Sloan for alienation of affection and pursuing criminal charges. Sabrina's being hit with adultery and desertion. Her access to your money is blocked. Accounts are frozen, and her name's off everything." George leaned forward, his voice serious. "Brandon, be on your guard. They mentioned cutting your brakes, burning the place down. I've got friends in the department who'll keep watch, but don't take chances. Lock up. Stay ready." Brandon's gaze flicked to the knife lying on the table. "They won't get the jump on me," he said quietly. Later that day, the phone rang. Sabrina's voice came through, brittle and uncertain. "Brandon, you're home?" he answered, voice like stone. "Yeah, surprise." She lowered her voice, lacing it with what she hoped sounded like honesty. "I kept waiting for your call. I needed to explain everything." "Save it," he interrupted, his tone icy. "I know about Sloan, the baby, and the money you took. You're trying to rope me into raising his child, aren't you?" Her answer came in a whisper. "I'm sorry." But then suspicion crept in. "Wait, who told you that?" His reply was laced with venom. Got it straight from the source. Though calling him a source is generous, more like a jackass. "I've got the recording, Sabrina. You and Ethan scheming to cut me out." She sucked in a breath. "That won't hold up in court." "It was just talk," she pleaded. "Come on, be rational. We can work this out." "You think I'd sit down and share you with him?" Brandon snapped, his fury breaking through. "Are you out of your mind?" "You did love me once," she said in a velvety tone. "And I loved you. But then you ran off to that stupid war. What did you expect? Me waiting around like it's the 1950s? I have needs too, you know." He barked a laugh, bitter and hollow. "Needs like draining my accounts dry? Or cozying up to a snake who wants me dead?" She didn't flinch. Her voice came back sharp, bitter. "Don't you dare act like you're the victim. You're no saint, Brandon. You've taken lives. Marines are trained for that, right?" He gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went pale. "I fought for my country. You sold me out for a check." A tense silence followed. Then she struck with a voice like ice. "You wouldn't get it. Ethan's got power. He has wealth. He's everything you never were." Before Brandon could unleash the storm inside him, another voice jumped in. Ethan's, smug and loud. "Hang up, Sabrina. He's garbage." Brandon's expression turned into a mask of cold fury. "You better lawyer up. I'm coming for everything you think you own." Ethan laughed, mocking him through the phone. "Bring it on, soldier. I'll bury you. You're finished." The line went dead with a sharp click. Brandon stood frozen, breathing like a bull ready to charge. Someday, Alyssa would change the course of his life. But tonight, all he could see was vengeance. Later that evening, with rage simmering just beneath his skin, he limped to his beat-up truck, ignoring the pain radiating from his leg. He drove toward the watering hole, a grimy dive he hadn't stepped into in years. The area had decayed even further since then. Dark, narrow alleys wound like broken arteries through crumbling buildings. Shady figures drifted under blinking neon signs. Brandon parked and walked inside. The stench hit him instantly. Stale booze, smoke, sweat. Familiar faces were long gone, replaced by men in gang gear with eyes that followed him like predators. He took a stool at the bar and sipped a beer in silence. His fury burned behind his eyes, but he tried to smother it with alcohol. Then, a muffled scream from outside shattered his haze. His heart jumped. Kane forgotten. He was on his feet and out the side door in seconds. In the alley, 5 or 6 men surrounded a young woman, some flashing knives under the street's weak light. She was backed against a filthy brick wall, tears streaking down her face. "Please help me," she choked out. Brandon's rage ignited like dry brush. Combat instincts took over. He yanked a Bowie knife from under his coat. "Step away from her," he roared. One of them turned, sneering. "Back off, old man, unless you want to get sliced." Without hesitation, Brandon advanced. The thug lunged, but Brandon ducked and slashed his wrist, sending the blade clattering. The rest came at him. 2 faltered when they saw his scarred face and burning glare, but the others pressed on, weapons drawn. Brandon met them head-on. He parried a blow and opened a deep gash in one man's arm. Another caught him with a wooden board across the back. Brandon staggered, spun, and drove an elbow into the attacker's ribs. Sirens wailed in the distance. The gang scattered into the shadows. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Blood trickled down Brandon's face. His stitches had split open again. 2 of the thugs didn't get far before the cops rolled in. One officer stared, stunned. "Hartley? Didn't George tell you to stay out of this area?" Brandon gave a breathless shrug. "I've seen worse." The woman, still trembling, kept thanking him. "I'm Alyssa. You saved my life." She studied his face, worry creeping in. "You're bleeding pretty bad." He brushed it off. I've had worse. Paramedics arrived and patched him up. The cops let him go with a warning. Alyssa, still shaken, admitted she was living in her car, running from an abusive partner. She had no one. "Come on," Brandon said in a low voice. "I've got a spare room. Hope you don't mind a bit of mess." She hesitated, her eyes studying him. "I'm serious. You wouldn't be a burden." There was something in the way she looked at him, maybe the honesty in it, that quieted the turmoil spinning inside. She was clearly vulnerable, alone, but her gaze held something rare, an open, unguarded gratitude. No manipulation, no hidden motives, just sincerity. Brandon handed the truck keys over to the police, letting them deal with it, then climbed into Alyssa's weathered old Dodge Dart. They drove in silence for a few moments before she spoke, her voice cautious. "You served in Vietnam, didn't you? I saw you on TV. You were awarded the Silver Star." "Yeah," he said, voice dull. "Wish I could forget." He didn't bring up Sabrina. That wound was still bleeding, the guilt still raw. The pain was ever present. But in this moment, something unfamiliar stirred inside him, something like hope. Maybe helping Alyssa meant he hadn't entirely lost his sense of what was right. She settled into his life without resistance. She picked up around the house, made simple meals, and spoke with candid honesty about her past. She used to be a secretary. A string of tragedies had left her broke. Yet she didn't complain, didn't ask for anything. There was no bitterness, no pretense. By the end of the first week, she was already under the hood of his truck, grease smudging her cheek. "These spark plugs are shot," she said confidently. Sabrina had always mocked the mechanical work he did. Alyssa, on the other hand, embraced it with real interest. Then the phone rang. Mike McGregor. The court had scheduled the divorce hearing. Criminal charges were also underway against Sabrina and Sloan. "Dress in your blues," Mike said. "Let the judge see the decorated Marine, not the man she tried to destroy." As much as anger burned inside, Brandon couldn't stop the thought from creeping in. Had Sabrina really wanted him dead? The evidence said yes. Still, his mind couldn't let go of the woman he once loved. He pulled out his uniform, carefully polished each metal, every inch of brass and fabric. "You look incredible," Alyssa murmured, fingers gently brushing the eagle, globe, and anchor on his chest. He offered her a strained smile. "Doesn't change the fact I'm about to face the woman who nearly wrecked my life." Her hand touched the scar on his cheek. "She never deserved you." "You'll be free soon," she said softly. He drew her into a quiet hug. "Thanks for being here." She looked up, eyes glassy. "You saved my life. And you gave me back something I thought was gone forever." He rested his forehead against hers. "Just don't leave. That's all I ask." The day of the hearing arrived. Brandon walked into the courtroom in full dress blues, Alyssa close beside him. He leaned on his cane, his steps deliberate, but the presence he carried turned heads. Behind him came 14 Marines from his reserve unit, Lieutenant Colonel Johnson and Sergeant Major Roberts among them. His parents were there too, faces proud, but cold with restraint. On the other side, Sabrina made her entrance. She wore a form-fitting dress that accentuated her pregnancy, Ethan Sloan next to her in an expensive suit. Sabrina's eyes locked on Brandon's face, bruised, scarred, part of his ear gone. His injuries harshly contrasted with the gleam of his uniform. She leaned in to whisper something to Ethan. He chuckled under his breath. Brandon took his seat next to Mike, who was already organizing court papers. The judge entered, an older man with sharp, perceptive eyes, and called the room to order. Everyone stood, then sat. The proceedings began. Mike laid out the facts methodically. Sabrina's betrayal, the money siphoned from their joint accounts, the damning audio suggesting murder, and Ethan's manipulations. The judge raised an eyebrow more than once. Then came Sabrina's performance. "Your Honor, she began, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt Brandon. I was drowning in debt. My salary couldn't keep up. Ethan only stepped in to help." Mike gave a short, audible scoff that drew a side-eye from the judge. "Mrs. Hartley." "Not for much longer," Mike interjected calmly. "We're filing for an immediate divorce." Sabrina threw him a deadly glare. "I was lonely," she continued, milking every word. "He left for a war people barely supported. I felt abandoned. Ethan was there for me. I thought the baby was Brandon's, I really did. I only found out the truth later. I'm so sorry." Brandon's jaw tensed. Her fake remorse felt paper thin. He could still hear her cruel voice from that one conversation, the venom behind the words. Then the audio recording played. Sabrina's lawyer protested, but Mike held steady. It was recorded in public. There was no expectation of privacy. The judge allowed it. The courtroom fell silent. Ethan's casual references to fatal accidents echoed from the speakers. Sabrina's cold, calculated voice discussing their finances made several people gasp. She kept her eyes on the floor. Her cheeks reddened with humiliation. Ethan's face twisted in rage. "That was a private conversation," Ethan snapped. The judge slammed his gavel. "That's enough, Mr. Sloan. After hearing that, I'm in no mood for tolerance." Ethan shot up from his seat. "This is a setup. He's just a grunt in a uniform pretending he matters." "Sit down and stay silent," the judge thundered. "Speak again out of turn and you'll be removed." "I'll find you in contempt," the judge said icily, his voice as flat as his verdict. There was no compassion in the room as he handed down his decision. Brandon was granted a swift and final divorce, citing Sabrina's betrayal and abandonment. She was ordered to repay $7,100, half of the funds she'd siphoned away, within 6 months. Everything else was stripped from her, save for her personal effects. There would be no alimony. Brandon owed her nothing. The judge noted that criminal charges might soon be filed by the district attorney against both Sabrina and Ethan for conspiracy, though those proceedings would unfold separately. As the judgment echoed through the courtroom, Ethan suddenly leapt from his chair, fury twisting his features. He kicked back the seat and lunged toward Brandon. "You bastard! I'll ruin you!" he shouted. Before he could make contact, 2 bailiffs closed in, slamming him to the ground and restraining him with cold metal cuffs. Sabrina stood motionless, the color draining from her face. She tried to speak, but Alyssa stepped between her and Brandon, eyes blazing. "Don't," Alyssa hissed. "You gave up the right to speak to him when you plotted his death." Sabrina's lips quivered. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was lost," she said, voice trembling. Brandon replied, low and bitter. "You left me helpless in a hospital, carrying another man's child. You drained me of everything." His eyes locked on hers, steel cold. "You chose this path, Sabrina. Now live with it." The fallout didn't fade quietly. The scandal erupted like wildfire in the weeks that followed. Ethan was fired and disbarred after a formal investigation exposed damning ethical violations. Brandon's attorneys hit him with a civil suit. Sabrina managed to hold on to her paralegal job, but barely. Her pregnancy and the reluctant pity of a senior partner were all that spared her. The word around the office was clear. Once the baby came, her days were numbered. But the child never arrived. The pressure shattered her, and she miscarried. Doctors informed her that she would never carry again. Meanwhile, Brandon's pursuit of justice began to twist into something far darker. Recordings confirmed Ethan had actively plotted his murder. The district attorney might not have enough for a conviction, but Brandon had no plans to let him walk free. Dark thoughts stalked Brandon at night. Visions of ambushing Ethan in an alley or tampering with his car brakes danced through his mind. The man he had once been would have recoiled in horror, but the man left behind, hardened by war and betrayal, began to embrace the rage. Friends like Mike McGregor and George Williams warned him, let the legal system take its course. But his father, Benjamin, offered a different kind of advice. Quietly, he said, "If you have to do something, I won't judge you. Just don't get caught." Alyssa sensed the storm brewing inside him. One evening, curled up together in a recliner, she whispered, "Don't let hate eat you alive. You made it through hell. Don't let them drag you back into it." "I'm trying," Brandon murmured, his voice barely audible. Then, one night, Ethan was assaulted outside a bar by masked men. They beat him mercilessly, causing permanent damage. A note was pinned to his coat, scrawled with 2 words, "Semper Fi." When the story hit the news, Brandon's expression barely changed. A faint, cold smile flickered on his lips. He turned to Alyssa. "I was with you that night, remember?" She froze, her heart racing. He said nothing more. Ethan spent weeks healing, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Legal bills and hush money drained him dry. He appealed his disbarment and lost, leaving him broke and disgraced. Word spread that he was holed up in a cheap motel. Not long after, he was found hanging in a storage unit. The police ruled it a suicide. There were whispers, of course. The scene looked too clean, the setup too neat. But the case went cold. When Brandon heard the news, he didn't speak at first. Then came a low, sardonic laugh. Good riddance. But victory didn't bring peace. Instead, it left behind a dull ache, like closing a book with too many pages unread. Sabrina's collapse came more slowly. Shunned at work and eaten alive by regret, she moved into a dreary apartment on the edge of town. One night, drunk and desperate, she dialed Brandon's number. He answered groggily. "Sabrina?" A dry chuckle crackled through the line. "So you still remember me?" His body stiffened. "What do you want?" Her voice slurred. "I've lost everything. The baby's gone. Ethan's dead. The firm's letting me go. I wanted to say sorry." His jaw tightened. Too late for that. She let out a bitter laugh. "You always loved playing the martyr." Then, her tone softened, brittle with pain. "I loved you once, didn't I?" He said nothing. His eyes stung with tears. Just then, Alyssa entered, wearing one of his old shirts. She gently laid a hand on his shoulder. He hung up. The phone rang again. They let it ring. Days later, Sabrina died in a car accident. Authorities believed she'd fallen asleep behind the wheel. Brandon went to the funeral out of obligation. He stood beside Alyssa and his parents, watching Sabrina's pale, lifeless face in the coffin, stripped of arrogance, of fury. She looked smaller than he remembered. Broken. He thought he'd feel closure. But inside there was only quiet, a hollow stillness. Over time, life began to mend itself. Slowly, quietly, peace crept in. The courtroom battles ended with a victory in his column, granting him a substantial settlement. When he returned to the shop, Wilkins greeted him like family, immediately doubling his pay, and, by 1980, placing the entire business in Brandon's hands. Alyssa, unwavering in her devotion, stayed close to him, slowly weaving herself into the very fabric of his life. Just a month after the divorce papers were finalized, he asked her to be his wife. Her eyes lit up as she said yes. Their wedding honored his military roots, a proud event complete with dress blues and the ceremonial arch of sabers. Over the following years, the ghosts of Vietnam and the memories of Sabrina began to loosen their grip. Brandon continued serving in the Marine Reserves and eventually attained the title of Master Gunnery Sergeant before retiring in 1992. He and Alyssa had 2 boys, both of whom grew up amid the clang of tools and the hum of machines, learning the ropes in a workshop that flourished under Brandon's steady leadership. Yet, even in the stillness, the past had a way of whispering back. Some nights, he'd settle on the porch with a glass of whiskey, staring down at the Bowie knife resting on his lap. Flashes would return. Da Nang, the ambush in that narrow alley, Sabrina's betrayal, Ethan's menace. He'd made it through, but the journey had carved deep scars. Alyssa would come up behind him, wrap her arms around his shoulders and murmur, "I love you. You're safe now." He'd give the faintest nod, rotating the blade slowly in his fingers. "Yeah," he'd reply in a low voice. "I am." By early 2008, he and Alyssa felt the time had come to step away from the shop, handing it over to their sons. Retirement brought a calm rhythm to their days. One day, as they strolled past a tattoo parlor, Brandon paused in front of the window, eyeing a large rose etched in bold ink. Alyssa nudged him teasingly. "Thinking of adding to the collection? Don't forget that Death Before Dishonor banner still sprawled across your chest." He looked at her, paused, then silently walked through the shop's door. Curious, she followed him in. "What are you doing?" she asked, puzzled. He removed his shirt, baring the worn tattoos, the scarred skin, the jagged shape of his ear. Pointing to his chest, he said, "Right here, I want your name. So it's clear you're the one who brought me back, who believed in me when everything else was crumbling." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You don't need to do that," she whispered. "Shh," he replied softly. "I do." The tattoo artist, a young woman with sleeves of vibrant ink, studied his battered torso, hesitating. "That's a tough patch, Grandpa," she said with a playful smirk. "You sure you can handle it?" Brandon met her gaze without flinching. "I've faced worse." As the machine whirred to life, he tightened his jaw and absorbed the pain. Images raced through his thoughts, gunfire slicing through jungle, Sabrina's deceit, Ethan's threats, Alyssa's enduring grace. The sting of the needle became something more than pain. It was redemption, a mark of change. He had made it through war and heartbreak, clawed through the shadows, and found light in the form of a woman who refused to let him fall. When the final wipe cleared the last smear of blood, her name stood bold and unshakable over his heart. He touched it gently with trembling fingers, eyes brimming. Alyssa's tears mirrored his. This wasn't just a tattoo. It was a vow carved into his skin, proof of a love he had once thought forever lost after Sabrina. As they stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of the past didn't press quite so heavily. He had survived because he fought, to stay alive, to endure loss, to keep moving. But with Alyssa beside him, he'd finally found something better than survival: peace. She'd shown him that even after betrayal, even after war, love still had the power to come home. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.